Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. My name is Larissa Disler, and I'm the Adult Services Librarian at the Galena Public Library in Galena, Illinois. Tonight's program is the first of our series of 3 Earth Month programs and is made possible by a donation from Hendrika Regas and the Galena Green Team. Thank you so much, Hendrika and the Green Team. So with all that out of the way, I would love to introduce tonight's presenter. Benjamin Vogt is owner of the design firm Monarch Gardens, LLC. He's the author of Prairie Up, an introduction to natural garden design, as well as a new garden ethic, cultivating defiant compassion for an uncertain future. Benjamin's work has been featured in Dwell, Fine Gardening, Horticulture, Midwest Living, and the Wall Street Journal. So without further ado, we're lucky to have him here tonight. Welcome, Benjamin.
All right, thank you, Larissa. Thanks everybody for joining me here tonight or tomorrow or 2 weeks from now, whenever it may be. I'll get over here and get my screen popping. All right. So hopefully everybody is in and admitted and we ready to go. I usually start out with a joke, but I'm not feeling too jokey. You know, it's almost 90 degrees and it's ridiculous. The heat's got me down. I got to tell you, I'm sure it's warm by you guys too, especially if you're listening to me from the Midwest, Eastern Plains, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, anyway, let's dive in. We got a lot to talk about, and I will definitely leave plenty of time for question and answer. Again, you can put your questions in the chat as we go along, and then at the end, Larissa will moderate that for us, and I'll be happy to answer as much as we can in the time allotted. All right, let's get going. Let's learn how to prairie up and unlawn America. Let's go. Let's do it. Oh, shoot, that's the wrong slide. The wrong presentation. Let me flip over here. This is what we want to see. Okay, this is actually headquarters out here in Lincoln, Nebraska. This is what it's all about, right, folks? This is what is before us, the work that we have to do. All the green on this map is lawn in the United States. That's a pretty large area. If you put it all together, it actually equals the square acreage of the state of Georgia. Just in lawn areas in the United States, we're using 20 trillion gallons of fresh water, clean fresh water that so many people around the world don't have access to like we do. We just have a plenty, don't we? Of course, you think about 20 trillion gallons on our lawns, and then we use 30 trillion on just our crops. This is a problem. That's way too much waste. With climate change, drought, we are in a pretty hefty drought here. I'm speaking to you from eastern Nebraska. We cannot afford to be throwing away water on lawns that are just there basically to look pretty and occasionally use. The conversion rates of lawn in America are incredibly high, 5,000 acres per day. That number is probably actually higher. That's an older number. Amazon rainforest, we're losing 10,000 acres a day, and that number is probably also higher at this point. It's ridiculous, isn't it? And that's why we're all here. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but the choir needs jazzing up too. Always, always. So some positive stats for you. I do not make promises that everything is happy. Of 30 commonly used lawn pesticides, 19 are linked to cancer, 13 to birth defects, 21 to reproductive disorders, 15 to brain damage. And of course, there are way more chemicals out there than just this. We have so many forever chemicals as well. So of those, 17 are detected in groundwater, 11 toxic to bees, 16 toxic to birds. Idling a gas-powered leaf blower for 10 minutes produces as much toxic exhaust as driving a large pickup truck for 235 miles. So think F-150 Chevy Silverado. It's crazy, isn't it? Now, less than 2, and I have to apologize for some of these slides being a little bit askew tonight. I think my cat was having fun on my computer. So less than 2% of the original tallgrass prairies in the central United States are still here, still somewhat intact, making it more threatened than the Amazon and Indonesian rainforests combined. 70% of all US grasslands may be actually gone by 2100. That is certainly within the lifetime of my son. I'm going to throw a couple of maps at you to show you where grassland prairie could be again, because we still have all the fauna here using these habitats. They are still here. We still need to and should be providing for them. So this map, this is one version of showing the original extent of the western grasslands and the central grasslands and prairies. Certainly argue that things go further east. Brown is everything that's been taken away, especially in light of large agricultural monoculture. So think corn and soybeans. So brown's everything's taken away. So let me go back. That's what was. Everything is taken away. Next map is everything that is, and this is an older map. This is from 2005, so this is less too, especially in Dakotas where we've had a big oil and natural gas boom the last 5-10 years or so. You can see that green strip in eastern Kansas. That's the Flint Hills. Really hard to farm on top of rock, just like 1/4 of Nebraska is the Sand Hills. It's really hard to farm on sand. We have so many grassland ecosystems in this country. Every state has grassland, meadow, prairie, savanna, whatever you want to call it. We use multiple terms for basically talking about the same thing. So, we have the Palouse out in the Northwest, California grasslands, which are just, there's just really a small red dot left over there anymore. You go to the Southeast, we have all of these different ones. And there's actually a map out there that breaks this up even more in even more detail. We still have grasslands, at least remnants of them, in Long Island, New York, the Hempstead Plains. They're everywhere. All right, some benefits for native plants. This is good tattoo-worthy material for you. Native plants provide 15 to 35 times the caterpillar biomass versus exotics. And of course, birds eat caterpillars. They feed caterpillars and the high-protein insects like that to their young almost exclusively. Native plants support 3,500 species of native bees that have a longer flight time than our exotic honeybees and provide specific pollination like buzz, which increases fruit yield, fruit quality, and even shelf life. So the more diversity we have in our native bee species, the healthier our food and the more food we have being produced. Native plants are adapted to local regional climate, at least for maybe a little bit longer. We have climate change putting pressures on all this stuff. Blooms are usually in sync with emerging insects, right? We have specialist insects, especially some specialist bees that time their life cycle, their 2 to 4 week life cycle around when a specific species or genus or family of plants is in flower. So I'm thinking there's a Monarda fistulosa specialist bee out there. There's actually a Monarda something is the Latin of that bee. Kids today see 35% fewer butterflies and moths than their parents did 40 years ago. This might be the last kind of depressing slide, but we need this information to really, I think, kick ourselves in the butt here and help others see the issues going on. We have 50% fewer birds than we did 40 years ago. 230 of our North American bird species are at risk of extinction within the next decades, probably sooner. And again, 96% of songbirds feed only insects to the young. So again, that's caterpillars, adult insects, spiders, wasps, all that good stuff. That is primarily what baby birds in the nest are eating. They're not eating birdseed. Oh, there's that Monarda specialist down there on the bottom. And then we have a bunch of other specialist insects on here. If you can identify all of these, I will not give you a brand new Porsche. Okay. All right, by 2050, over 70% of Americans are going to live in urban areas. And these are places with greatly diminished green spaces. Or if we do have green space, it's primarily dominated by lawn spaces. Now, plants clean air and water and soil. They reduce stormwater runoff. We're going to have so much more stormwater runoff with deluges that occur with climate change. And of course, plants cool the air and cool structures, right? So that we're using less energy, less air conditioning. Views of complex nature increase the mental and physical health of school children, office workers, and patients in hospitals. If you don't believe me, pick up my books, wink, wink. Well-designed, diversified landscapes raise home values and spur community engagement while reducing crime. There's a lot of stats on this information. More diverse, thick landscapes are not a detriment, or at least we need to not see that as a detriment. We need to go from spaces like this. And this is a picture of Lincoln, Nebraska, where the Cornhuskers, you can see there in the middle left where the Nebraska Cornhuskers lose all their football games, which is totally cool with me. I'm a Gopher. If you're in Illinois, you don't like that, so I should shut up. Anyway, we need to go from spaces like this to spaces like this. Nebraska State Capitol, which was once actually the original plan, showed that the grounds were supposed to be in prairie. Instead, they're in lawn. And let me tell you, they are out there mowing and watering this sucker 5 times a day. We need to go from spaces that look like this to spaces that look like this. The garden I designed at Bellevue University, south of Omaha, Nebraska. We need to go from spaces like this, a steep slope, almost a 45-degree slope at the University of Nebraska Medical Center. Grounds crew was thrilled that we were going to be killing this lawn and replacing it with urban meadow. Let's go from spaces like this and make it look like this. Let's have some more inspirational photos. I owe you guys from some of those depressing stats earlier. There's a client's front yard. It's just a very small, really just 2 small beds out front. You can do a lot in a small space. We're going to talk about this a lot here today. Our gardens continue to provide all kinds of ecosystem services, including habitat and stormwater runoff mitigation well into winter, if not all through the entire winter. One of the other gardens here at HQ. 2 client spaces here. Here's a sedge meadow. You can do these types of gardens in shade. A lot of people will say, I've got a lot of mature oaks or maples. I know I can't have a bunch of pretty flowers or a bunch of plants underneath. I know I can't have it be native, and that's not true at all. I love doing these shade meadows. This is a young shade meadow where the sedge is established faster than the forbs, and we also had some budding pressure, but the forbs are coming along, the flowers are coming along well and nice. Another client space, they said, we don't want any lawn. And I said, will you marry me? This is a match made in heaven. So they don't have any lawn out front. And they do have a lot of people walking by and saying nice things. I'm sure some of them muttering not nice things, but c'est la vie, that's how it goes, right? All right, let's talk about designing, how we go about creating these spaces. This is just going to be a teaser, a taste. I give a longer presentations. I go into a lot more depth, but you're going to get a lot here today, I think. So the goal when we're doing these natural landscapes, especially lawn to native plant meadow conversions, is to think like nature, think like wild. When we're walking a nearby prairie, what are the plants that are growing there? How are they self-organized? What does the species dominance look like, et cetera, et cetera. So our thick layered gardens that are using native plants are going to increase habitat and climate resilience, and they're going to minimize the need for weeding, mulching, and watering, just like the landscapes do out in the wild. Because when you walk in a prairie or a grassland or a meadow, there's a lot of thickness there, and the plants are really on top of each other, right? There could be 50 plants in a square foot or a square yard or something. So there's a lot of layers going on. Now, we can't really have that in an urban suburban type landscape for a lot of reasons we could talk about later if you want to, but we can parse out how those wilder landscapes are constructed and sort of create a really evocative and still sustainable echo of the landscapes at home, at businesses, around churches, around schools, et cetera. So we have basically 3 layers: a ground cover layer, which you go out to a prairie and meadow, it's going to be sedges and grasses. We have seasonal theme layer, which is flower or forb layers. I'm going to say forb all the time. It means flower. It's just a technical term that us fancy pants hort people use. So forbs that are blooming different times during the growing season, spring, summer, fall, right? Then we finally have the structural layer, which is going to have the least number of plants. Tall herbaceous perennials like Joe Pieweed or tall coreopsis and things like that, sunflowers, as well as short shrubs, tall shrubs, maybe small trees. Those would be in the structural or architectural layer. So this is how you put the garden, this is how you put it together, so to speak. So when you go out to the wild, this is what you see, right? It's incumbent upon us to study wilder landscapes around us so we can start to understand how things are working in our ecoregion and our zip code. Because you certainly don't want to garden by USD hardiness zone, right? And if you're curious about why not to do that, please go search my blog over at the website. Basically, USD hardiness zones, they apply to so much of the country. Zone 6 in Colorado, Zone 6 Virginia, those are totally different. So we need to think about at least gardening by zip code, if not ecoregion. So here are some client spaces where we are doing this. We're doing this thing densely. We're doing this thing thickly. We have a lot of layers going on in these spaces, right? And this makes them more competitive against weeds, keeping soil moisture at higher levels, and of course, providing more habitat, reducing stormwater runoff, cleaning the air, sequestering way more carbon. I've got a friend who recently just did a study showing how these native plant landscapes are fostering beneficial microbes in the soil, unlike other landscapes, and that is helping them to sequester a lot more carbon than they otherwise would be able to in those spaces. Okay, so your primary layer in a natural garden that you're putting together is probably going to be grass or a sedge. Here we have an example of grass, Bouteloua gracilis, blue grama grass is the common name. So this is your base layer. Some people call it living green mulch, matrix, both terms we use in these spaces. So these plants are going to be plant spaced about every 12, maybe every 18 inches. I prefer to do everything 12 inches apart because I want the ground plane to get filled in really quick so we can compete against weeds ASAP. So imagine you are planting this garden, you got the Bouteloua spaced 12 inches apart, and then you come in and you're going to do your seasonal flower from 4 layers, right? But the most biomass, the most plant material is probably going to be in this matrix living green mulch ground cover base layer, just like you would see if you're walking out in a wilder prairie or meadow. Okay, design is really important in these landscapes, and I'm probably going to harp on it a lot today because we don't think it's really hard to think about. We don't think about it enough, especially if we are wanting to appeal to our neighbors. And I think we do want to appeal to our neighbors and bring them on board and meet them a little bit in the middle. We're not going to lose ecosystem function or habitat when we use some traditional design methods in these landscapes, like planting flowers in masses and drifts. So maybe you have a monarda, you plant 3 of them together, and you repeat that 5 times across the landscape. That repetition, that massing shows intention to neighbors and people driving by. If you just throw out a bag of seed, you don't know what you're going to get. You don't know what's going to make it. It's going to be 5, 6, 7 years before you know what has made it and grown from seed to plant, and it could be total chaos. It's going to look weedy. So I'm a fan of using potted material to create these landscapes so we have more control over them. We're going to talk about using paths, benches, and arbors to show intention and welcome humans into the space. Sign. Yeah, and when we are doing a front yard landscape, and we're doing about, I don't know, 30 of these a year, I'm working really hard to keep the plants relatively short. The funny thing happens when people are walking their dog by the sidewalk in front of a house, right? They like to be able to see, over the plants in case there's danger, like a lion or an elephant hiding back in there. This is just primal memory from our, way back when we were growing up on the plains of Africa and the Mideast. So we're keeping plants about 2 to 3 feet tall. A few plants are maybe going to get 4 feet tall, but they're very open and airy species like elatrus or something like that. So that uniformity in height also goes a long ways in showing that this is an intentional space. Okay, I am a person who's managing this and knows what they're doing. If we are using taller plants, they are in the middle of a bed or the back of the bed, just like we would have in traditional garden design. So for example, here's a very small front yard bed. This is maybe 200 or 300 square feet. Taller species are in the middle, and the back of the bed, shorter ones are all around them, and we probably have 15 different native plant species here. So it's a very highly designed meadow. A lot of flowers, maybe more you would see in a typical wild natural prairie. All right. So Benjamin, this is all great, but how do you actually prep the space? Well, there are several methods, and it depends on how good your back is, how good your knees are, how much time you have. If you think your neighbors are totally cool seeing a sheet of plastic across your front yard for 6 months. So these are all the different methods. I'm just going to, so you can sheet mulch it with cardboard or paper. You can solarize it with plastic. Now, if you're doing plastic, that's something where you put it on the yard for 4 weeks, you take it off for 2 weeks, you let the weed seeds germinate, and you put the plastic back on for 4 weeks, and then take it off for 2 weeks, and you let some more weed seeds germinate. And the purpose is just to exhaust the weed seed bank, especially if you know you have a very weedy site. You can rent a sod cutter, of course. That's a lot of pollution going there. There's a lot of pollution with solarizing when you're using plastic. What are you going to do with all that plastic waste? We do not need more plastic waste in this world, let me tell you. And a sod cutter is a really unwieldy machine. Or you can spray kill the lawn with one quick application. That one causes a lot of debate. And we can talk about these methods later if you want to. But I do have lots of articles on the website if you want to learn more in depth about these and the pluses, the pros and cons of each method. Now, I long ago stopped designing landscapes on paper, but I know it helps a lot of people to see this visual representation of how plants are being laid out. I'm a very artistic person, so when I'm designing a garden, I just sort of walk out there with my 1,000 plants. I'm like, oh, these would go great over here. These would go great over here. These are going to work with these species and blah, blah. Okay, so there, on the left, so you can see here in that image, there's massing and drifting. You can see on the image on the right, that's a 5,000 square foot landscape. There's a lot of repetition of the massing and drifting. And while all those colors are representative of, 3 different seasons, spring, summer, and fall, that it makes it look a little bit crazy, doesn't it? So if we could take out some of those colors and just show spring, summer, and fall, it wouldn't look so chaotic to us, but they are all there. I am a fan of using plugs. Plugs are basically baby plants. You're not going to find them for sale at a big box store. You're probably not going to find them for sale anywhere, a brick and mortar that you can walk into. But you can find them at wholesale nurseries, and you can find them via a company called Izel Native Plants, IZEL. They work with wholesalers who will ship plugs to you, and plugs come in trays of 32 and 50. So if you have a large landscape and you know you're going to need a lot of plants, use them. Plugs establish a lot more quickly. They're so much easier to dig because they're so much smaller. They're going to be the same size as a 1-gallon plant in 12 months. I mean, here's the size differences, right? We like to use 2.5-inch pots there on the left, or a 50 plug, or they come in 32 plug trays. That 1-gallon pot is going to be $15 to $20 probably at a big box nursery. Okay, that 2.5-inch pot, where some local native plant nurseries to me, they're selling it for maybe $4 or $5. Maybe a little less, it depends. That tray of 50 on the right is going to be about $100 and $120. So you do the math, you want to be using plugs if you can get them, especially if you're on a tight budget. Plugs are the way to go. They also don't need watering for too terribly long, usually. We're out here gardening in clay soil. I probably have clients water for about 2 or 3 weeks, and then usually the plugs are pretty set to go. In the autumn, it might even be less than 2 weeks of watering once or twice a week, because hopefully we get those good fall rains and cooler temperatures. Of course, if you're gardening on sand, you have to water more. So don't take everything I'm saying as gospel. All right, I talked to you before about matrix, about ground covers, about layering these landscapes to mimic what what these plant communities are doing out in the wild. So this is a graphical representation of plan of the matrix or green mulch ground cover. Okay, so all those green dots are a Bouteloua gracilis or a Schizocaria scoparium little blue stem or a sedge or something placed 12 inches apart. So it's just a nice grid, a net you just lay down on this base. There's your base layer, there's your ground cover. Then you come in with your forbs or your flowers and you mass and drift them according to how they prefer to grow, and that requires doing some research. Don't just trust plant tags, do some research. We can talk about sources for that later if you'd like to. So there's a bunch of different species, and this is just a 100 square foot space. So this probably actually needs some more flowers. Here's a brand new landscape. We're still watering here, as you can see in this image. So it was just planted. Usually these spaces take about 2 to 3 years to really fill in. This front yard was spray killed, and then we put down about 1 inch or 1.5 inches of wood mulch just to help with a little bit of weed control and soil moisture the first year, and to help the neighbors see that this was an intentional design space, that a professional landscape designer came through and did some work, because people read mulch as intentional. This is landscaping. This isn't just somebody tossing out bags of seed, right? One of the best tools you can use if you're using plugs or 2.5-inch containers is a drill. Now, if you have really loose loamy soil, you can use your standard household drill. The motor will not burn out on you. If you have clay soil that's really difficult to work in, you're going to want something a little bit more robust, like a mixing drill. We love using mixing drills, corded and cordless. Obviously, the corded ones are less expensive. But if you are planting hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands like we do, you are going to want a drill whose motor is not going to burn out on you. And we use solid core auger bits that are 3 inches wide and 36 inches tall, so we don't have to lean over too much when we're drilling. So we just go bzz, throw a plug in, bzz, throw a plug in, and we're doing that thousands of times over and over. So yeah, mixing drills better than a household drill if you have clay. Yeah, I've already talked about living green mulch, haven't I? The biggest labor the first year in these sorts of conversions, and hopefully again, you are planting thickly, 12 inches apart, if not shorter. The biggest thing is going to be weed control, annuals, things like crabgrass, things like foxtail. But usually by the second year, weed problems diminish by 75, 80%. And by the third year, it's practically non-existent because we plant it in thick layers like nature does and put things really tightly together. Okay, so hopefully you're getting a little bit excited and you've gotten a little taste about how to do this. So let's say you've done it, right? You can expect that some of your neighbors aren't going to be happy with you, and that's just how it goes. Whatever, this is a new paradigm. It's kind of scary to people, and that's okay. But it's important to do. This work is incredibly important. I know that's why you're here. So weed control might come. Somebody might report you. It's not just going to be city officials driving around town and being like, oh, or oh, that one needs to get reported. It's going to be your neighbors. So that's what we're going to talk about here for a good chunk of the remainder of our time. So why might weed authorities come? Why might neighbors report you? Well, if your landscape looks like this, there is nothing wrong with this landscape. This is actually great what's going on here. This is a big rain garden next to a parking lot next to a restaurant. Okay, so it's doing lots of really good things. But if this is in your suburban or urban front yard, this is not good at all. These plants are way too tall. This is a wild organized landscape. There's no design control in it at this point. So, but I think the biggest issue is the plants are too tall and a lot of them are going to flop over. So we don't want to have plants that are 4 and 5 feet tall in a front yard landscape. We want them to be 2 or 3 feet tall. Why might somebody report you? Because, maybe your bed looks like this. Yes, you have a mowed clover or fescue lawn in there in the front. Somebody's clearly taking care of that. But the pacra there that's blooming right there in spring, no, that looks messy and weedy. I mean, it's pretty too, but it looks messy and weedy too. If you are a monarch fanatic and you want to support monarch butterflies, like this person does here, they have planted a lot of common milkweed. Now, again, the plant's too tall. Common milkweed is also a very aggressive root runner, right? So in a small landscape like this, it's really not a beneficial way to design a landscape. Plus, if you're hoping to support monarch butterflies, all you're supporting right here is larvae, which is really important. You got to have caterpillars, right? So you have the milkweed in the place. The problem is there are no nectar plants. There's no other plants for coverage for monarchs to go off and pupate, et cetera. There's not support for other species. So I would love to see more diversity here. And if we're going to have milkweed, let's use orange butterfly weed, Asclepias tuberosa. Here's another space on a street. So this is a health strip, that space of land between the sidewalk and the street. If you park here and you're the passenger and you try to get out of your car, well, you're just trying, aren't you? It's kind of like really hard to get out and walk through that evening primrose there. So something needs to be shorter right there. Maybe we can have taller stuff closer to the house. So just basic design concepts to keep in mind when you're planning these landscapes. Sometimes in our excitement and activism, we forget that these urban wildscapes are for people too, right? Where if we're living in an urban area, again, 70% of us will here pretty soon. If we're living there, this is a people-dominated place. How we come together in these landscapes to share ideas and experiences with nature colors how we grow and work together. I think of these natural landscapes as supporting the community. It's a community of wildlife. It's a community of people there, especially when we think about all the benefits that they, again, cooling the air, cleaning the air, reducing stormwater runoff, et cetera. So if you are reported to weed control and you have an inspector come out, and I hope you do, don't just give up. I know that the letters they send are very threatening, right? They sound very menacing, but have an inspector come out. And when they do come out and you're walking around with them, know the scientific or Latin names of your plants, because I can tell you out of personal experience, that's going to win the battle for you right there, because you can identify every plant. That's not a weed. I know exactly what that is. And I even know the scientific name. I'm Captain Brainy, so just memorize that stuff. Don't be intimidated by the Latin. Have a list of plants that are serving as hosts for specific insects, and know what those insects are and be able to name them. Oh, that's a coneflower and it's a host to what do they host to? Geez, I'm bad tonight. Not a checker spot, is it? No, it's like turtlehead right there. All right, forget it. Oh, I'm flubbing that one up. All right. So yeah, and be able to cite scientific studies that show the benefits of these meadow plantings and all the ecosystem services that I've been throwing at you and talking about today. Let's get some more inspiration. I'm going to show you very designed landscapes by some top designers from around the country. This one is Adam Woodruff landscape out near St. Louis, Missouri, I believe is where it is. So you can see here, everything, there's a pretty much a uniform height. There's massing and there's drifting and there's repetition of those masses. So it looks really put together. It's like it's a very stylized wild meadow. So I think this is perfect for an urban or suburban front yard. It's a nice middle ground, inviting people and wildlife into the space. Here's a work by Fido Studio. I think this landscape is out in Pennsylvania. Again, you can see the massing and the repetition of the Monarda bradburyana, that purple blooming flower right there. So this is just a snapshot in time. And I want you to notice too, this is a rather large landscape. A lot of us probably don't have front yards with this much square footage, but I want you to notice that there's basically just one dominant species that's blooming. So there's only one color palette at one time. So when you have a smaller space, I think it's really important that you limit the number of flowers that are blooming at one time to maybe just 1 to 3, so it doesn't look as crazy and overwhelming to somebody walking by who might not understand what you're doing and the purpose behind landscape and art until reading all the things that you have read and explored. So keep that palette simple, at least in the early years, and then you can diverge and do more further down the road. Spring, these landscapes are still looking good. This is Kelly's garden out in Des Moines, Illinois. You can see it's got a nice path walking through there. You can see the repetition. This is a little bit wilder. This is a little less stylized than the 2 previous landscapes I've shown you. Here's headquarters here in Lincoln, Nebraska. Diversity of forms. I love using some of these species that look a little bit more formal in their shape, just naturally on their own. So you can see there in the top left is a plant called Baptisia minor, dwarf false indigo. It's got that nice rounded shape. It almost looks like some sort of, boxwood or something. And that's just how it's growing on its own. But that formal shape, I think, really helps interpret the space for people who are used to more formal foundation plantings. All right, cues to care, because this is important too when you're hoping to win over neighbors and hopefully not have them complain to weed control. Also, hopefully, you're giving beer to your neighbors or whatnot, right? Some hard lemonade or something to appease them. All right, cues to care are design elements in a landscape that help show it as purposeful, as welcoming to humans, and just overall intentional. So here, this garden has a 6-foot wide lawn path. The lawn path, I think, is really important because it ties into the lawn that is basically the rest of the neighborhood, right? But that path is nice and wide. It goes right up the middle, and it says it's like a red carpet. Come on down. No, that's Price is Right. Anyway, it says, welcome, come on in. This is for you too, even though these 2 smaller beds on the flanks are sort of wildish, especially when compared to lawn or just a mulch bed with a bunch of hosta. Lawn paths are wonderful. So here's a client's landscape where they went ahead and did the edges for me. Wonderful curving lawn beds in here. Spray killed everything else, and then we planted straight into that dead lawn after doing a 1-inch mulch layer. Flagstone pathways, cue to care, right? Paths are a big cue to care. So are structures like arbors and fountains and benches, see what else? Well, yeah, sculptures in general. Support a local artist and get a wonderful piece of abstract art and put it out in your front yard meadow. We can also do this on a really more formal scale. This is Nick, who designs out in the Columbus, Ohio area. Does a lot of boxwood parterres, and then within them, a little bit more wilder meadow type spaces. So I think this really works as a middle ground as well. Cues to care, yeah, chairs, everything. There's lots of cues to care in this image. Again, if you can name all of these, I will not get you a fancy sports car. Signs are incredibly important. Work with a lot of community gardens, and it's wonderful they put signs out. Your home garden, you should be putting a sign out too, especially if it's in your front yard. Something basic. It doesn't have to be as wordy as this. I can't imagine anybody pushing a stroller, dragging 2 kids and 5 dogs is going to stop to read this sign. So it can just be something like, this is a native plant garden that's requires less water and supports pollinators. Just something simple like that. Here's another example of a sign. This is a great sign, but still might be a little bit too wordy for most people. I like things simple and bold. You have to tell me if you think these signs are wordy or not. And what does maintenance look like? Once these gardens are fully established, again, takes several years. Primarily just mowing the space down in the spring. I just mowed down earlier this week or in the last week because soil temperatures were finally 50 degrees. It's not about air temperatures. It's not about daytime temperatures. It's not about nighttime air temperatures. It's about soil temperatures. So once the soil stayed into the 50s, and I think it's probably in the upper 50s, almost 60 degrees now, it's been so hot, then you can start mowing if you have to, if you need to clean up, if that's part of your management goal. And I got a blog post about that too. Do you really need to clean up? How are you going to do it? Why are you going to do it? But generally, it's just mowing at the highest setting, bagging up everything you mow and composting it or throwing it into your neighbor's yard. Oh God, don't do that. Don't throw into your neighbor's yard. Now, lawns may certainly seem easier to manage and maintain because we all grew up caring for them, right? Our parents said, all right, Susie, you're going to go outside and you're going to mow the lawn. Just go do it right now. Don't complain about it, right? That's what we grew up doing. That's what we know how to do. You mow every week at the same height. You water, you fertilize, you aerate. You do all this stuff when the TV and radio ads tell you to. Does anybody listen to radio anymore? These natural gardens are a little bit trickier. And I think in some ways they are harder because we're just not familiar with them and we're not familiar with the plants yet and how the plants move and how the space is really dynamic and it changes every year. And we want it to change. We want the plants to move around and fill in and show us what they want. So again, managing that more diverse garden means knowing the plants and just paying attention to them year after year, letting them teach you what they want, where they want to go. And I think that's really cool and exciting. That's not necessarily more work. It's just a little bit, it's like learning a foreign language, right? Once you get it, once it clicks, it's very empowering and liberating. So a natural garden is not more work than a lawn. It's just, it's often a lot less in a few years. I mean, again, if you're just mowing in the spring, isn't that a lot less work than mowing every week? And if you're watering and fertilizing your lawn, you're just giving yourself more work, right? Because you're encouraging the grass to grow. Who would do that? That's crazy. All right, I already preached about this a little bit. A spring cleanup is not about air temperature. I'm just really, I'm not upset. That meme going around that says 50 degrees is dubious at best. I like the idea that we're encouraging people not to cut down gardens in the fall. We absolutely should not be doing that because there's still habitat, there's still seeds for birds, there's still all the the rainfall is being captured. The plants are still having a lot of ecosystem benefit. So I like that we're showing people not to cut down in the fall and appreciating the beauty of brown in winter. Brown is a color too. Let us celebrate all the wonderful hues of brown in these natural prairie and meadow garden landscapes. You don't want to walk on your garden too soon in the spring. You might be crushing, bumblebees that are overwintering, hibernating just below the leaf litter. Of course, there are adult morning cloak butterflies that are doing the same thing. There could be amphibians out there, and stepping on wet soil helps to compact it more, and we don't want to do that. So hold off as long as you can. If you already have stuff coming up, you should have probably mowed already, though. I bet we have questions about this at the end. And again, do you really have to clean up? What are the management goals? So there are different areas here at headquarters where we're managing them differently. I showed you that main meadow, it's 2,000 square feet with a lawnmower. I'm mowing that down every year. And I'm even going so far as raking out the thatch because I want sunlight to hit the soil and help more flower seeds to germinate. My goal is to get more flowers out there because it's a bunch grass dominated landscape right now. So there's there's reason for managing that space like that. Other spaces I don't even cut down. Some spaces I am cutting down partially and leaving 12 to 18 inches of stems from certain plant species that I know native bees like to use, especially at 25% of native bees that are cavity nesters. They love to use things like, and I'm going to throw Latin at you, sorry, it's what I know, Zizia, Echinacea, Eutrochiums, Monardas, Asclepias. They love to use those species for nesting sites. If you have a front yard landscape, you definitely want to tidy it up. You definitely want your neighbors out there to see you working in the landscapes. You're managing it. This is intentional. Look at me. Again, beers on the sidewalk would be helpful. This is, see, Colleen, Elaine, Heather, and Sarah put this together for us. It's a wonderful graphic to show you when to cut down or how to cut down plants and when to leave them. So if you're cutting down plants and leaving 12 inches of stem right now, those stems need to stay up until what 2 years, right? Because you're going to cut down the stem to 12 inches right now, bees are going to nest in it and they're not going to come out, they're not going to emerge for another 12 months. So you got to leave those stems up during next year's spring cleaning. So anyway, that's a lot of information today from a lot of angles. I just want to say you can do this, and it's, just dive in. Go ahead and rip out all your lawn. No, you can start out small. That's okay. I like to go big myself, but get your feet wet and just start doing it. Just start to take out a little bit of lawn at a time. Start to take out beds that are dominated by hostas or butterfly bushes, things that are really not that beneficial to wildlife. Appreciate winter, the beauty of fall and winter. This is a lot of Bouteloua, Curtipendula, and Schizochirum scoparium in here. So that's Cytotsgrama and little blue stem. I'm really bad at common names anymore. It's all about the Latin and the scientific names. And don't forget about winter when we have wonderful freezing fog or hoarfrost come through. Man, I am out there at 8 in the morning taking as many pictures as I can as my hands literally freeze off or freeze to the camera. Here's another client space. This is an acreage backyard. We did about 25 or 30 foot borders on 3 sides. We just sowed in some Cytotsgrama seed, planted a couple thousand flower plugs, and let it rip. Yeah, that's a lot of lawn, isn't it? This is probably what your neighborhood looks like, right? If you're like me, your garden is the only one. Somebody's already put in the chat, I can guarantee it. Have you convinced any of your neighbors to switch and think about their landscapes differently? Have any of your clients help neighbors or encourage neighbors to switch over? And I give you Exhibit A, unfortunately. This is the reality. And why that reality exists is very complicated and complex, and I could give you a 10-minute speech about it, but there are some valid reasons for it. Anyway, there grows the neighborhood. I hope you will let the neighborhood just grow, okay? And don't forget, I stand in solidarity, not solidarity. Well, I can if you want to. I stand in solidarity with all of you. I'm so glad that you are going to be doing this work. I know you guys are going to be doing a lot of wonderful things this spring and summer. If you're interested to learn more about this, my first book, A New Garden Ethic, is the very philosophical, deep why. So it's a slow read. It's a gut punch read. Prairie Up is the very practical, introductory. Anybody can do this sort of thing. This is how you do it. How-to guide. My gardens at headquarters are also featured in American Roots, and that book shows, I think, something like 20 gardens from around the country. It's a very beautiful book. And I encourage you to please go to my website and at least peruse all the wonderful free resources. I probably got something like 300 or 400 free articles now on the website. The newsletter is free when you sign up for the newsletter. I just added this earlier this week. When you sign up for the newsletter, you get a free garden plan with a species list and a how-to and all this wonderful stuff. And hopefully it encourages you to get started. But also have online classes, PDF pocket guides to help you get going, a design workshop that you take with me personally. And if you're interested in any of that stuff, I'm offering 30% off to you here today. Anyway, all right, that was pretty good. That was about 40 minutes. I know that was a lot. I actually give a lot longer version of this presentation that is super, super detailed, but I think this is a good starting point. So let's do the chat now, see what we have up there. There comes Larissa. She's helping me out.
Here I am. All right. So the first question here is, what plants would you recommend for slopes?
Yeah, whatever. Again, it doesn't, it doesn't matter. I guess, what plants would I recommend? I cannot exactly say because I don't know what the soil type is. I don't know if it's full sun. I don't know if it's shade. The important thing is, as with any landscape, density. Okay, you're planting 12 inches apart. It's important to use, I mean, you're going to be using these kind of plants anyway, but it's important to use plants that have fibrous root zones like grasses and sedges. So, they have a lot of those fingers going down. They're going to hold in the soil. You can use tap-rooted plants that go down 9 feet deep and they're really going to hold soil in place. Bulbs and corms, just all these different species with different root types, but you're going to be using that anyway. So basically what you would use in a flat space, use it on a slope as well. That's the short cop-out answer, but it fits.
All right. I have a question about your thoughts on a very small area balancing growing flowers and growing your own food, but also supporting insects and smaller ecosystems, and a way to do both in a small area.
There's a wonderful book out there. Actually, I haven't read the whole thing, but I think it'd be really helpful. I think it's called Foodscaping Revolution with Brie Arthur. Okay, so this book discusses planting vegetables with flowers, right? And I think this is really important because when you have plants bringing in beneficial pollinators and beneficial predators like wasps, that's going to increase your vegetable yield quality and hopefully reduce your pests, right? So I think it's a great idea to not only have a patch, a wilder patch, or a more native plant patch nearby, but even, I think you can even successfully design a space that's having vegetables and perennials and annual flowers all mixed in together. That takes a lot more knowledge than I have because, a lot of our vegetable plants are highly ornamental, right? And would probably benefit in even more ways being planted closely and tightly with other more ornamental plant species like native plant flowers and such and grasses and all that good stuff. But yeah, mix them up however you want to, so you can improve your fruit and vegetable yield.
Okay, this commenter has 3 acres. It says, I have started transitioning some of it to native landscaping, and then the remaining lawn has clover, dandelions, and violets growing wild. Is there a benefit to keeping lawn and allowing those beneficial weeds to continue growing, or to grow out a lawn rather than killing it?
Oh, are you using the lawn space would be my question. And how are you using it? If you're using it once per month to kick a soccer ball around and, your heart is telling you to do something else, then maybe you should think about doing something else. Now, those weeds you mentioned, those weeds you mentioned in the lawn really aren't that beneficial. Those are exotic species. So the support they are offering to our native ecosystems and native fauna is very limited, right? What is going to be far more beneficial to the ecosystem, and not just thinking about food and habitat, but thinking about other ecosystem services like cooling and cleaning in the air and cleaning soil and reducing stormwater runoff. What's going to be more beneficial is having a much more diverse landscape of 15, 20, 30 different species in there. So I think anytime you can limit a monoculture or even a simplified landscape, even a lawn space that has 3 or 4 or 5 different species in it, anytime you can minimize those more simple landscapes and bring in more diversity, that's going to really up the ante and up the benefit across the board.
Okay, Shar asks, I have a 3-acre pasture. I'm thinking of converting. Should I burn the pasture or mow it to start off?
Okay, I'm going to cop out on this one too. You need to consult with a local expert. That's always the best thing you can do, because I'm not there looking at the landscape, seeing what's going on. You really need a local expert to help you do that.
All right. Linda asks, if you plant thickly, do you eventually have to divide and thin things out?
Mm-mm. No, boy, that sounds like a lot of work. That's like traditional gardening too. You talk about dividing, some of those grasses get thin in the middle. You should divide them and split them. Blah, it's too much work. I hate that work. No, these plants are going to do that work for you. They are going to self-organize and they are going to in some circumstances, they're gonna kill off some species for you. There's actually a lot more nuance and complexity to this, right? Because I'm mostly talking about using perennial grasses and flowers, but you can also use biennials and annuals, right? We do this with a lot of seeding projects. So where the first year, all of our annuals are going to do the show. They're going to take over. They're going to cover the ground for us, and it's going to seem like we don't have any perennials out there at all. Second year, the biennials take over, and the annuals have pretty much all disappeared. And you're like, gosh, where are the perennials? It's just a biennial show. It's just a black-eyed Susan Rudbeckia Herta show. And then the third year, what happens? Then those perennials come along. And this is something called succession. And we can plan for this because a lot of perennial forb species don't really get going for a couple of years, especially those that are working on deep taproots like Baptisias and Echinaceas and things like that. So yeah, there's a lot of nuance to this. But anyway, those plants are going to self-organize. They're going to do their thing for you. So I would just, yeah, don't worry about dividing. Let the plants guide your management. Let them show you what's going on in the landscape, what they want to do, where they want to be. And if gaps open up, then, go to the nursery and buy some stuff.
All right, question from Chris. What do you spray kill with that isn't toxic or bad for the water table?
Yeah, that doesn't exist. This is a conversation that people yell at me about. So I hope we don't have that here tonight. When we're killing our lawns, we are just using one application of a product. You guys all know what the product is I'm talking about. I'm not going to say it because I don't want to go there with you. I actually wrote about, I think, 4 pages in my book, Prairie Up, about this, the reasons why we do this and the benefits, and certainly there are drawbacks, but again, it's just one application. It's just targeting the leaves. It's not staying in the soil. You're not spraying bare soil. Please don't ever spray bare soil. You're just spraying the plants. It's staying in the leaves, okay? This isn't like you're an agricultural corn or soybean field and you're out there spraying. I don't know how often they spray. Somebody will have to tell me. It feels like it's once or twice a month or something. And then once you harvest the crop, you spray it again to reduce mold. We're not doing that. This isn't decades and decades of killing soil microbial life and not having plant diversity and density in landscape. This is just one shot on the lawn. The benefit of spray killing a lawn is you're highly reducing erosion on the site. So if you're on a slope, you want to leave that dead material there and leave the roots there. Your weed pressure is going to be significantly less in a lot of cases because you're leaving that dead plant material there shading the surface. And you're also going to be adding organic matter back into the soil. Now, all the plants you're putting in the ground are going to be adding organic matter anyway, just by the fact that the roots are going into the soil, opening it up and amending it naturally over the years. So what are the other? I'm trying to think. There's another benefit I had in mind, but there are a lot of them. Read the book. Yell to your spouse later about it if you feel like you need to. But and again, I think another benefit is you're not, if you're an older person, you got bad back or bad knees or something like that. It's really hard to go out there and use a sod cutter, spread plastic, spread cardboard, throw mulch around. This can be a lot simpler thing. Just make sure you always read the labels of whatever product you're using.
Okay, follow-up question from Chris. So you simply spray kill and then add plugs. You don't need to pull the lawn up.
No, you don't need the plant. That's the beauty. That's the beauty of this, and this works really great too if you're like doing a landscaping business, because you spray the lawn, it's dead in about 2 weeks, and then we just come in and do an inch or two of wood mulch, usually just to spruce it up a little bit, maybe add a little organic matter through that mulch. And yeah, we just plant straight into it. It is incredibly simple and incredibly effective.
Okay, Diane asks, what's the best way to choose plants for my zip code?
Okay, that's good. Besides telling you to purchase my online class on that subject, so there are lots of websites like Xerxes Society, Pollinator Partnership, I think was it the Wildlife Federation or somebody else. There are lots of websites where you can just do a basic zip code search. Now, this is not going to give you all the plants. These are just basic lists. Pollinator Partnership at least has PDF guides where they're telling you a little bit more about your ecoregion. And I think they're just doing really big ones like 6 or 8 or something across the country. But again, you can read more about this in my book and the online classes where I go into really, really great depth about this stuff.
All right, and we have a question about black walnut. How much does black walnut limit growth?
That's funny. I swear I get that comment about every other presentation, that question. These are all great questions. Thank you guys so much for asking these tonight. Actually, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know because I don't have black walnuts. I would think that sedge species and woodland species would be defined about around under them because they have been evolved for that. But I do not have personal experience with black walnuts, so I am sorry.
All right, question from Hendrika. Can I just sow the ground cover grasses, then plant forbs into it? Should I wait till the grass comes up?
Ah, okay. Got. I want everybody to have a copy of my book now because I go through all that stuff in there point by point, and of course in the classes again. But yeah, it depends. Okay, so it depends if you're leaving grass there, if it's bare soil. I'll tell you what we do. So when the client is very cost conscious and we need to reduce the budget a little bit, we're sowing the grass in. A lot of the time we're sowing the grass into killed lawn. We're scalping that lawn really short so more sunlight is hitting whatever little tiny soil gaps are in between the blades of dead grass. We're scalping that lawn really short. We're broadcasting seed at 2 to 3 times the recommended seeding rate from wherever we purchase the seeds. So we're probably using something like Cytotes grama, Bouteloua crotopendula because it germinates really quickly, really easily. And that will be our primary matrix. So we sow that. Actually, we're going to sow that second. We're doing the flower plugs first. We're doing our massing and drifting of flower plugs first into the dead grass. Okay. And then we're coming in and we're sowing whatever matrix or green mulch, grass, native grass, bunch grass into that space. Now, don't use wood mulch because seed is not going to germinate in wood mulch. So you're just sowing at 2 to 3 times the recommended rate into the dead grass that you've scalped, and you're seeding after you have dug in your flowers. So hopefully that was a clear, if not wordy explanation for you.
And Patricia asks, what was the name of the native plant wholesaler that sells flats of plugs?
Yeah, they're not a wholesaler. They are a middleman that helps you, hooks you up with regional wholesalers. They're called, I always butcher their name. It could be Azel or Izel. I can't remember anymore. It's I-Z-E-L, Izel Native Plants. It's probably pronounced Azel. It's bad of me not to know, but they are just absolutely fantastic. They'll work with regional plug wholesalers that usually just work with professionals like me. And this way you can get the material that we're using, save a buck, and get that garden going a lot quicker.
All right, those are all the questions in the chat. If anyone has anything else, speak now or forever hold your peace.
Yeah, you have 3 minutes. But again, yeah, those are great questions.
All right, lots of thank yous coming through.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate you guys.
Yeah, so if there aren't any more questions, I will end the program here. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yep. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. Nice shirt. Really like your hair.
All right. Okay. I think we can end it here. I'm going to close up the library as well. So all of you have a good night. Have a good Earth Month. And thank you, Benjamin, for being here with us.
Thank you, guys. Prairie Up.
Prairie Up.